Because we're all learning.
So we have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the economy. Not the Ontario economy, we're in the middle of an election, but just kind of you do that, right? We're in the middle of an election campaign. But just sort of the economy writ large about what you see. And we're going to start with Victor, about what's happening with the economy. Are we preparing properly for the future of work, for what's happening in Canada now?
It's a good question. I think if you asked anybody about the economy in Canada today, you get different answers, depending on their own reality, right? And that's kind of what's happening today. Everyone's kind of observing their own reality in this time of massive change. We've had 150 years as a country where we've become one of the leading nations in the world, not only for our sort of political posture and our view in the world, but also for our standard of living. We have one of the highest standard of living in the world. Highest mortality, highest life expectancy. All the statistics that you look to for a developed nation, Canada would stand high on top. And now we're in this time of change, right? So we have trade agreements being sort of bullied about, if we can say that. We have technology that's really sort of tearing apart and rebuilding the economy, and some people are benefiting from that, others are being displaced by that, right? But I think the most important thing is, are we ready to stand up to that challenge as a country today? Are we going to make the next 150 years in Canada as good as the first 50 years? And it can't be like the first 150 years, but it can't be completely unlike the next 150 years. We're a country that was built on our resource industry, that then evolved to manufacturing and our service industry. And now if you look at the strengths in our economy, I'd say that the technology industry and the new service-based industries are real strengths. There are 300,000 unfilled technology jobs in the country today. We don't have enough people with the skills to fill those jobs. At the same time, you have people who are displaced as well. And we have to be conscious of that and have to be there to support them and retrain them, and bring them back into society so they can be contributing members of society. But that technology economy is real, and it's reshaping our economy. Banking and real estate, as much as we've had a really incredible ride because of low interest rates, and that's created a bit of a problem for us. Low interest rates have created asset inflation in real estate. It's created asset inflation in other parts of the economy, and that can always be a danger in terms of how do we work our way out of that. But still, those two sectors continue to be healthy. And then the natural resource sector is at a crossroads. You've got Hydro-Quebec who's trying to sell power into Massachusetts on a 20-year agreement. They can't get it through New Hampshire. You've got Alberta who's trying to get our energy to markets where I believe that Canada can produce it better than anybody else can in the world today. And I think what we need to do is bring more of Canada to the rest of the world and stand tall and say, how do we bring this country that's been great for the last 150 years, take the past, make it better, take the future, make it even better, and marry the two together so our standard of living for everybody doesn't drop. And that's the biggest thing I worry about today is the debate that we're having internally in the world that we live in today. People look at it from the outside and say, is this the place that I want to invest? Is it the place, some parts of the economy? Yes, some parts of the economy, no. But broadly speaking, it'd say, maybe there are some other places. And we need to make Canada the destination for human capital, the destination for financial capital, in order for us to have that standard of living, because that's really what defines us, is our democracy and our standard of living together, not one or the other. And we have to fight for that. And we've come to that moment where we all have to fight together. We're all going to come from different points of views. Like that. If someone's going to come and say, I'm opposed to this, someone's going to come and say, I'm opposed to that. But in the end, Canada can fray apart unless we come together. And that's what I worry about the most, particularly given what's going on right now in the U.S. in terms of the political economic agenda.
Bob?
I'd like to thank the Pearson Institute for allowing me to be here. I represent 500,000 men and women who build Canada's infrastructure. That infrastructure enables everything that people do. This hotel is part of the infrastructure. The heat and light in your home, clean drinking water, bridges that don't fall down are part of the infrastructure. We are invisible people. You don't see us when this hotel is being built. You don't see us when your power is being produced. We are simply gone. The only time you ever see us is when there is the rotund guy with a cigarette hanging out of the corner of his face with a stop and slow sign, and it makes you really annoyed. That isn't our business. Our business is building and maintaining Canada. We have an infrastructure deficit in this country which is enormous. If you talk to the consulting engineers, they will tell you it's $1 trillion. If you look around at the grid, which runs north and south in this country, not east and west, we don't really care what happens in our neighboring province. We're selling it to somebody else. If you look at our roads and the state of them, if you look at where our bridges are, if you look at things like our potable water. Here in Toronto, 40% of the potable water that is produced leaks into the ground because the infrastructure stinks. There are gas lines running in almost everyone's house. It's infrastructure that needs to be recuperated and regenerated. And we're not doing that. So for the people who build the infrastructure, we are the infrastructure. Without the skilled trades, you go nowhere. And without the infrastructure, we go nowhere. We are a cold country with a very sparse population spread out over an enormous, vast country. We are natural resource dependent, we're transportation dependent, and we are a long ways from any market that really matters to us. And for a number of our valuable commodities, we've got one customer. And when that customer gets a, let's call it a less than progressive person running it, the world gets a spin. We are at the mercy of the madman with the orange hair, whoever that may be. So we've got to think about what we're going to do. The infrastructure to be built, the infrastructure to be maintained, if we don't do it, buy blankets and get candles, because it isn't going to be very comfortable. Everybody get on the what do they used to call it? I even wrote it down. The infrastructure highway. But with no comfort stations, it's going to be a long trip.
So in Mississauga, I think there is a real dichotomy, and there's also a growing disparity. So let me set that up for you. So we have a very strong economy. Our unemployment rate is relatively low. We have a AAA credit rating. We have 88,000 businesses, 73 Fortune 500 companies, 1,200 multinationals. We have a very strong economy, as I have said. There's strong sectors. We are now the second largest life sciences cluster in Canada, and because of the move of Bombardier back to Mississauga, we are now the largest aerospace cluster. So our economy is strong, but the disparity grows stronger. I've had the opportunity now to serve as the chair of the GTA Mayors for the United Way, and we're trying to educate, especially during the election now, inform government that they need to continue to invest in social services because people are falling below the cracks. I have 60,000 people monthly using one of our 9 food banks. In a city as affluent as Mississauga, that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't have 16% of children living below the poverty line, people not being able to afford real estate in our city. So what's the future look like? The good news is, in particular Mississauga and many of our GTA cities, we have highly trained, highly educated, highly skilled workforces. So we're always collaborating with UTM or Sheridan College. We just opened an innovation center last week to look like a Ryerson DMZ at Sheridan College. We are trying to match train our youth at UTM or Sheridan to match the skills needed in the workplace. We're the one level of government looking to create that strategy to attract more foreign direct investment into our city. We have a strategy solely dedicated to bringing more life sciences companies in. So we're building, we're continuing to educate our youth and train our population. But my council is also very progressive. So we're looking at things like how do we continue to make housing affordable so we don't push people out of the market? We want people to be able to live and work in our city. So what are the incentives we can give our developers, whether it's deferring their DCs so that they can build units that are affordable? And that doesn't mean smaller. We're talking about units for families that have 4 and 5 bedrooms. So we're looking at transit, public transit as well, because of course set up transit allows people to get to work. We're building our light rail transit along our Ontario corridor, and that's been funded by our provincial government. There has been a renaissance. I think all cities will acknowledge that, with a federal and a provincial government working together with municipalities and investing, whether it's in social services or it's in infrastructure. We've seen a lot of infrastructure investment from the federal and the provincial government. And not only do I have a fully funded LRT coming as a result of the provincial government, but a hospital rebuild as well. And then on the diversity front, we are, as you heard, one of the most diverse cities. So it's very important to me to be very, in order to be very vibrant city, we have to be very inclusive. So a lot of my council looks a lot like me and is not very diverse. So one of the first things I did was create a Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee dedicated, well, made up of people who make up the top 10 cultural groups, religious groups in Mississauga, to give advice to council on how to do things differently. Are we being as inclusive as we could be? Simple things like fireworks, not just for stat holidays, but the Hindu population, South Asian want it for Diwali, and our Chinese residents want to light fireworks for Chinese New Year. Simple things like that, parking allowances. So on a diversity front, and you know I stood up to an Islamophobe racist individual about building a mosque in the community. Building a mosque in a community because the residents opposed it. It was the right location, which happened to be, by the way, zoned for religious institutions. So you really wonder if it had been a Presbyterian church, if the reaction would have been the same. It happened to have been a mosque. Or taking on the police. We did pass the motion of Peel Regional Police Board on stopping parking. We were going to mandate stop parking. And the second, we had called for a diversity audit. We said, Peel Police, you don't look like a microcosm of our community. We want you to better reflect the community. Let's do a diversity audit to see how we can do better. So those are some of the things, whether it's the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, which is for standing up to people who don't share our values. I know my chief of staff is sitting back there, he's going to cringe when I say this, but I always say we have no tolerance for any intolerance in Mississauga. We're a city where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed, and I believe that wholeheartedly. So when someone comes forward and says, you can't build that there, I'm going to say, well, why not? You get to the true root of the issue, which really was never about the parking and the traffic. It had everything to do with the racial element. So in the discriminatory element. Our council, I'm very pleased, is the only one in Canada to support Ikra Khalid in her motion on anti-Islamophobia, M103. We're the only council that adopted it and supported her. So we've taken some as I started off by saying, very bold and very fearless positions. You have a limited amount of time in your tenure when you're elected to get things done. So we're going to make the most of it, and I think we have.
And that contributes to the economy and the...
Of course it does, because it means everyone's working, right? Not just both genders, but people of all cultures.
Right. Thank you very much. What about you, Juliette?
Well, just because we've got this room full of influential people, two things. One is we need to put our best foot forward and have our best people at the table. And you all sit at a lot of tables, corporate, not-for-profit, government, and you really need to be looking around those tables and saying, who is not at this table? And if they all look like you don't have the right table, and it's going to hurt you business-wise, it's going to hurt you socially, it's going to hurt the future of our country. So who's missing? Are there women at your table? Are there people of color? Are there young people? Are there people who are disabled? You name it. If you don't have those perspectives at whatever table you're at, you're all powerful. Say something. Say, there's somebody missing here, and you just got to do it. The second thing is that the future requires us to have a lot of young people, and there are some in this room, and I'm looking at Shireen and Anna and Sarah and others. They need to be raised thinking that they are going to have to create their own opportunities, and they're going to have to look for them and know how to go after them. And if we shy away from words like entrepreneurial, and where's my friend Pat Dillon, we need to get comfortable with that, and we need to get comfortable with the idea that our kids are going to have 10 careers and they need to be prepared for that. and we need to bring them along. So if you're running CIBC, how are you retraining people? How are you bringing people in so that they're ready for the next thing? If you're a futurepreneur, how do you help people launch a business? How do you tell kids that it's okay not to be a doctor or a business person, but to run your own thing? For me, I'm going really grassroots. Heather Munro-Bloom and Heather Weissman last year announced that they were creating a Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation. I'm going to be employee number 1. Our mission is to make Canadian children the most literate in the world, but we have very big gaps in our country with kids who do not read and communicate properly. And to me, you are never going to find CIBC or the city of Mississauga or become a successful tradesperson if you can't read and communicate. And so that's where I'm going to put my efforts.
Okay, congratulations. And last but not least, Roberta.
Well, I spend a lot of time talking to Canadians about the importance of reality checks and not believing our own press. I think I can talk about, I'm on the Gender Advisory Council to the G7 Summit. So my head is filled with barriers for women. But let me tell you that amongst women, and talking about barriers, you know, here in Canada, we have people in a first world country living in third world conditions. We don't like to talk about that on the international stage, but this is our reality. And so the work I do with Indigenous youth, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, is really about creating a different Canada. Our people are trying to get into the economy. Some would say trying to get back in, since at one point we were in control of the economy. But let's talk about getting into the economy. And it's not easy. Even in an era of reconciliation, it's not easy. And you know, 4 out of 10 of our kids are going to successfully get out of high school. 4 from a First Nations community, compared with almost 9 out of 10 non-Indigenous Canadian kids. So this has to change. Fastest growing demographic group in the country with an aging population are Indigenous youth. Seems to me it's a no-brainer that we should pay attention to them. More than half of the kids in care in Canada are Indigenous youth. Seems to me it's a no-brainer we should be paying attention to that. And you know what? I'm here to tell you it is achievable. We can change that picture. I think many Canadians have heard about this and they feel terrible and even guilty. I'm not interested in guilt. I think it's a very self-indulgent emotion. It's very selfish. I'm not interested in it. What I'm interested in is action to create a different future that everyone can see themselves in this country. And our biggest barrier is education, without question. Education, education, education. From K to 12, our kids do not receive dollar for dollar what non-Indigenous kids receive as students in our communities. Full stop. When they get out, climb the summit and get out of high school, I know Victor knows this because CIBC is a great champion and supporter of the work that we do. When they get out of high school and they become that 4 out of 10, we ought to be there for bursaries to support them. But there's a myth in the public that, oh, don't they all get their education paid for, cradle to grave? No. And then they don't pay any taxes. These are comfortable myths. Reality check, not true, but when we support them, and that's the work I do, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, at Inspire, 96% of the students we support graduate. 96! So it is achievable, and these are our change makers. Last year, more than 400 in business, more than 450 educators, more than 350 nurses, 150 odd MDs. Gotta have some lawyers, I'm a lawyer, 100
Not
lawyers.
too many, not too many.
But what I want to say is it is achievable, but we have to get that mirror out and look at it. Canada is a resource-based country. Guess what? Every Supreme Court decision lately says there are new tests, folks. Consent must be received from Indigenous populations. And so everything, I think, and the Prime Minister, he declared we're going to implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. There is, as we sit here, a bill being debated in Parliament that will pass legislation requiring laws to conform to that. He said we'll answer the 94 calls to action that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission put forward. I have never been so optimistic in my life as I am today, but I am worried. Let's not squander this opportunity, because there's a role for all of us, business, public sector, individuals. If we get a hold of this, we can create the kind of change we need and the kind of economy we need in which, guess what, everybody will benefit. That's the economy I want to build.
We've run out of time, and I just want to thank our fabulous five. Thank you very much.